Hey everyone, it's Blake, and welcome in to this episode of the 411 on Wrestling Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, I welcome in Ian Hamilton from 411 Mania to preview the G1 Climax 30, which is set to get started this weekend. We go into all the potential storylines and potential matchups and talk about what the expectations are for some of these wrestlers in the G1 Climax this year. So sit back and enjoy this G1 Climax 30 preview with 411 Mania's Ian Hamilton. All right, and as promised, the guest today here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast is Ian Hamilton. And Ian, man, thanks for coming on and doing this. I know we're very excited. The G1 is here, and it should be another fun year, even if this year, certainly it's a little bit different given the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like every single article I've written has made some mention of the pandemic and everything else that's gone not as planned in 2020, but G1, we're carrying it on at least a little bit later than we usually do. And surprisingly, they have got a field which is as close as normal, I guess you could say.
Yes, for sure. And again, we didn't know that we were going to have that field in terms of being maybe that close to normal, but it is. And when they announced it, I know that excited a lot of people to have the makeup that we have, of course, in both blocks, and we'll get into that in a second. One thing I did want to ask you, because this is something people have talked about over the years in terms of the tag matches on the undercards. Of course, we don't have that this year given the circumstances, but yeah, right. That's what I was going to ask you. I didn't know which side you stood on with that, but it sounds like you've made it pretty clear which side you stand on.
Yeah, on my own blog, I made a point of if it's made tape, I review it. Yeah. At least when it comes to New Japan. I know Larry for a while was kind of touch and go. Like some shows he would not touch those undercards. I don't blame him. I mean, G1s have passed. It was very much it was a set format, shall we say. You had your match, and then you'd have I'm just scrolling through the cards now. So obviously first show this Saturday, you've got first one Saturday would be random undercard, but for Sunday you've got likes of Zack Sabre Jr. against Evil. I'm trying to pull two together where you've got the same squad, so you'd have Naito and SANADA. There's the obvious team. There'd be an undercard match on the previous show, and there would be some form of one of their opponents, if not both, depending on how the lineups went. Yeah. It added to people's spreadsheets. I mean, my spreadsheet last year was massively boosted by all those undercards, but what they're doing in place this year, it's Gabriel Kidd, a personal favourite of mine. I mean, it's got to be British, right? Yota Tsuji and Yuya Yamura. Those three are having their own mini round robin tournament across the 18 days. Well, not jump, but they're having matching up in one form or another. So your unofficial C block, as it were, if you were. And to me, the Young Lions matches tend to be an underrated highlight for shows. I mean, it's a good way to get the card going. Basic wrestling gets the crowd going, and then you get the more seasoned, more usual pros, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, get rid of the 5 undercard tags, throw in a Young Lions match, and to me, it looks like 6 match cards. All of these, at least up to the final, you're going to be looking at maybe 2.5 hour long shows, which bring it on.
Yep, exactly. I was going to say it's always a marathon, and now having the less again the time with that and having less matches should be something it's a lot of fun and may even help people I think that maybe aren't normally familiarized with the G1 lean into it a little bit more because maybe it doesn't look as intimidating because you do just have the block matches. But let's start with A and just kind of run through some thoughts on that, and then we'll get to B, and then at the end we'll give some overall thoughts on maybe how things could turn out. Quickly, we'll run through the lineup for A. You've got Kota Ibushi, Kazuchika Okada, Tomohiro Ishii, Shingo Takagi, Yujiro Takahashi, Taichi, Minoru Suzuki, Jeff Cobb, Jay White, and Will Ospreay. Of course, I think as soon as this block came out, everybody was saying, okay, here's the block. You look at all these guys in here. This is going to be quite a block in terms of looking at the potential matches. I guess, Ian, just your overall thoughts here on this group, and I will throw in, but is anyone other than Yujiro going to finish at the bottom of this one?
I mean, I've done my pick'ems for voice wrestling, post wrestling. I have got Yujiro finishing bottom of the entire field. I've got him going 1-9.
Yeah.
I mean, we all saw when the blocks came out, there was the controversy. We can touch on that in a second. This is the workers' block. You've got your Okadas, you've got, Shingo, you've got Jay White, Kota Ibushi, Tomohiro Ishii. The big names who are relied upon every single tournament to bring out the best in each other. I mean, how many, G1s, how many New Japan Cups have we seen?
Right.
And, Ishii has been the guy who's been, may not have won any of them, but if you're going by star ratings or plaudits or whatever you want, he's been the guy who's been running away with, check out these matches. Oh yeah, who's match check? Well, Ishii had this one, he had this one, he had this one. He is, Mr. Reliable in these tournaments, and I've got him pegged personally as maybe joint fourth place, at least when he bunched them up. So it's not going to be in any danger of winning, but he definitely personal favourite. I mean, you look at some of the matchups in this block. I mean, I'm looking at the collated cards we've got on the 4-1 preview, and just stuff that just jumps out. Night one, Ishii Suzuki.
Yeah.
What else we've got? We've got okay, of course, usual. That's the night off. We've got Ishii Will Ospreay. That's the one a lot of people got their eyes on. Suzuki Ospreay Shingo. Every single. Well, mostly every single combination there, you're guaranteed one, if not two, good matches on an A block card this year. And when you consider the lineups we've got, the fact that we've only got one, maybe two really tough wrestlers in each block, to me, speaks for the quality. But yeah, block A, the workers block, and really, it's a bit of both. I mean, obviously, New Japan World, you're paying your $9.99 a month. So it's not a case of buying each night individually, but if you've only got time for half the shows, Block A is probably where you're going to go.
Yep, no, it's completely loaded for sure. And when you look at all these different potential, like you said, combinations, and really any combination you put together, you feel like you're going to get something pretty interesting and pretty entertaining for sure. I wanted to ask you real quickly about Jeff Cobb, because he's someone, I think everyone, we look back to the G1 last year, it seems like to me he started off strong last year, and then he just sort of maybe fell into being in that group with some of these other guys that were having such fantastic matches that he just was maybe one of those that was sort of in the middle. But now, if we look here recently, there have been reports that it seems like that he's kind of been teasing, okay, I've signed somewhere, I'm not going to say where it is, but it seems like all signs are pointing towards him signing with New Japan. And I'm just curious your thoughts on maybe what you've seen from Jeff Cobb. I've always thought he's someone that just, you watch his style, I found it very entertaining, of course, very physical type of style. Maybe just, we don't expect him to win this thing or anything, but maybe just what you feel like maybe the future is of someone like Jeff Cobb in New Japan.
So maybe I'm overthinking this. I mean, I've not gone into any kind of forensic detail on Japan's quarantine of their procedures right now, but we all knew like Ospreay had residence in Japan.
Right.
Juice Robinson had residence in Japan. Jeff Cobb, as far as I'm aware, unless I've missed something, doesn't have a residence visa. I mean, I may be wrong, don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
So for him to be in this tournament, either Bushiroad has made a very strong representation to Japanese politicians and gotten them a sudden residential permit, or he signed. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe I'm distilling things too much, but to me, that's one of the only two options I can think of. I mean, in this tournament, I don't want to say he's going to be swallowed up in this block, but you've got names who've been resident stars in New Japan: Shingo, Jay White, Okada, Ibushi, Ishii, Suzuki. I mean, there's six, and I'm only just looking at the first three matches on night one. I mean, I think if he has signed, this is more of an establishing tournament. I mean, you look for tournaments that's been in before, the New Japan Cup, USA variant as well, World Tag League. There's always been a bit of a hesitance, I guess you could say, in terms of he is very solidly mid-table, and they don't want to go much beyond that, because who knows? Okay, he was signed Ring of Honor, but if he gets signed to WWE or AEW and is exclusive, then you've wasted that time or that investment on a guy who you can't use. Now, if he signed with New Japan, great. Obviously, with the current world situation, this could be signed and he's based on the US side. They fly him over for the odd tours, which that's fine as well. But yeah, I mean, Cobb, I think the general feeling on him is he's one of these guys who he will match what his opponents do. And
Yeah.
I hope I'm not being unkind when I say this. I mean, earlier this year, I was over in Germany for 16 karat gold, and yeah, some pretty good matches. But it was they do a finalize like where PWG do their 10-man targets, all the spots all the time. He's in that 6-man tag at the end, and he absolutely shone. Like you don't expect a guy that big to be that agile, yet there he was, flipping and flying like the rest of them. So I don't think. I don't think he's the worst in this field, not by any stretch of imagination, but I do think a lot of what he does in this G1 is going to be dictated by what is happening from afterwards. New Japan's announced the Road to Power Struggle coming hot out of the G1. If he's hanging around for that tour, well, I could easily see him, being put in a feud with Suzuki for the Never Belt or something like that.
Yep.
But if it's a case of you're doing the G1, then you're going back to New Japan Strong, insert, suffix here shows, well, he may end up pretty close towards the bottom of the group. But, I mean, it's a good get for New Japan. I mean, Cobb, I've seen on the Indies for years. He's impressive, but I do think at this point, he's a guy who would benefit from having a lot of regular action, and whether that's in the LA dojo, whether it's touring in Japan, it's better than what Ring of Honor, any other promotion are doing in rally running.
You mentioned Minoru Suzuki. Of course, he's back in this field, in the G1 field after last year. That was the big thing we talked about when the blocks came out last year, is that he wasn't involved. And, of course, you certainly had some frustration there. One of the things you pointed out, you mentioned, of course, your column on 411, which we're going to link everywhere for people to reference here because you've done the entire preview here on the field. But he really has, to me, been someone throughout this entire, I guess we're calling it the pandemic era. I mean, he's been a lot of fun just to watch him do his thing, and he really seems to be one of those stars, which he always has been, but he's really been someone that's kind of been one of the stars of this era for me, just in terms of watching him and such. I guess for you, just to see him back in this field, seems like he's right where he belongs here, and certainly in this block. Boy, you're going to have some matchups here with him and these others in the block.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got Shingo. I mean, they've had absolute crackers in the last few months alone.
Yeah.
Okada. I mean, I was there in the Copper Box in London just over a year ago. When he had that title shot at Royal Quest. Ishii. I mean, that's a night one match. Suzuki against Ishii. They are going to knock the butts out of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, hindsight being 2020, I kind of believe that Suzuki not being in the field last year was a setup for that Royal Quest main event because. It saves him from that month-long tour. And we've got an absolute crack of a main event in London a couple of weeks after. I don't think Suzuki's going to win. I mean, I did touch upon this in the preview. I largely think guys who have a belt going into the G1 won't tend to do too well. It's like, you're not going to see Naito finish Norton 10, for instance.
Right.
Don't be stupid, but what tends to happen with the G1 is guys who have belts tend to have challengers set up for them. And Suzuki, he's got the Never title. Obviously, Naito's got the double gold. The losses they pick up will be few, but they're going to be important ones in general for the remainder of the year going into Wrestle Kingdom.
Yep, for sure. And it's going to be very fascinating, like we said, with this block for sure. And I guess, obviously we're not going to touch on everyone in this block individually, but just kind of doing our overall preview. Of course, we have to talk about, Okada, because he's someone, is in that spot right now where I think a lot of people are debating, what is the next thing? Is it, and you mentioned this in your preview, is it sort of that time to go back for him competing for the title, winning the title? How do you feel like this goes for him? Because I think this is one of the more intriguing aspects for me, just because we know his history. We know he's going to be back in the title picture. But what is this the situation where that happens, or how do you feel like this goes for Okada this year in the G1?
So, I mean, the fact that he's not been messing around with balloons is a good thing. He had that weird spell in 2018. He lost the belt for a few months. And, I don't know what it was. It was fun, but it just didn't fit him. What he's done since he lost the title at Wrestle Kingdom, it's been different. You've had him, kind of flirting. Then obviously we had the shutdown for the pandemic, which, that put a lot of spanners in a lot of works this year. It was guys who, the evil push, probably would have come earlier. So there's a lot of guys who best story in 2020 is being heavily interrupted. With Okada, I think that maybe we would have had these 6 to 7 months of being lost in the mid cards, being lost in the early cards. I mean, we had that run very recently, in fact, where Okada was second on the show, 3 shows in a row. If you just count the streaming stuff,
Yep.
He's never been that low down the cards. I don't want to say certainly since he won the IWGP belt early on. It's like he was the kayfabe creator of the King of Pro Wrestling trophy. Thank God he didn't win it. But to me, I think maybe that is the pinnacle of his weirdness, and now he slips back into game. My only concern is we had those 3 months of nothingness. He's had that time taking it easy in the mid cards. I'm not too sure if he can easily slip back into being the Okada of old. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I've got him down as winning the G1 overall.
Yep.
And I may as well say again, this obviously of the cards are out, and generally people gravitate to the final nights of each block to see, well, what's the potential eliminator. And for me, I think a lot of people's eyes drew onto this. Okada Ospreay, they've had matches before, and we do need to address the elephant in the room here for Will Ospreay.
Yep.
The whole speaking out movement, his name did come up. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into too much details. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter on this, and I'll be honest, there's a fair amount of this I agree with. With Ospreay, fresh allegations or repeated allegations of him blackballing Pollyanna, and all the associated stuff there. To me, he's done shows with Rev Pro, and he has caught an awful lot of flack, and so have Rev Pro for that. There's been less writing campaigns, and I'm being simplistic here, but there are people who've contacted New Japan in their masses to express their discontent about this. Now, from my position, the allegations from Ospreay were by no means the worst that came out during speaking out. But to put it bluntly, he effed up. He has not shown any kind of contrition. Yes, okay, he's through reports and through stuff he's posted on his Instagram, he has mentioned about mental health issues as well. Yeah, unfortunately, in 2020, with everyone being in lockdown, there's a lot more of us who are in that same boat. That doesn't excuse what we've done in the past. And I think you'll always have that cluster of fans who will feel like he should never work again because he blackballed someone. But I honestly believe that if he'd shown a slight bit of contrition, it was the meme was the screenshot notes apology. You think something more of that, but there's something from him to acknowledge he did something wrong, that he messed up, that he wants to make it better. But instead, we've got nothing. We've had Rev Pro book Andy Quilden talking in circles around him. You've had him being booked on shows, and it's just that one key element, the lack of acknowledgement, has upset people. There are a lot of fans who have said they refuse to watch the entire G1 for this, and they want to do that. That's their choice. Where this all ties back down to is reports that came out not too long ago that Ospreay was, at least pre-COVID, scheduled to win the G1. So the fact that we still have Okada Ospreay as a final night Block A match, to me, I've plotted my path in terms of where I think matches will go, and I'll be honest, I think if Ospreay wins the block, you're going to have a lot more damage in terms to the UK market than people not watching the G1 for a while. I mean, personally, I don't know. Ospreay, this is only second year of a tournament. I don't see him winning the block. I don't see him winning, but I can see a situation where we get to October 16, both Okada and Ospreay are alive. That's the elimination match, and yeah, it's in terms of the in-ring, they've wrestled before, we've had good matches, but just the non-wrestling, the other side of it, that's going to be a very sensitive situation for New Japan to deal with. And right now, I don't think anybody in wrestling has really handled, at least the Ospreay stuff, with any kind of gravitas.
Like you said, it's something that's going to be talked about. It has to be talked about based on the whole circumstances, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, we can talk about the in-ring stuff all we want, but it is something that's going to be brought up throughout it, and I think everyone understands it at this point. And it's interesting, we've talked for 20 minutes, and we've yet to bring up, I guess, in more detail, the two guys that met in the G1 final last year, and that, of course, is Kota Ibushi and Jay White. I guess just quickly before we move on to Block B, where you maybe see these two in terms of their path forward here. Obviously, Ibushi, he's had a sort of a different in terms of teaming with Tanahashi and all that. And now Jay White back into the mix, of course, after the whole pandemic and everything. Now being in a situation where he comes back, and maybe what your expectations are for these two.
So I see Jay White as being more closer to the finishing line, I guess, at the end. For pick'ems I have Okada finishing 7-2, Ospreay 6-3, obviously the final night being the tiebreaker. I have a three-way tie for third with Suzuki, Shingo, and Jay White in 5-4, and it'll be the final night with Suzuki and Jay White, I believe. Sorry, that's not the final night. Sorry. I could see Jay White on the final night losing to Ishii, which could then completely take him out of running. Kota Ibushi, I really want to do better, but I see him struggling.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say, the stink of teaming with Tanahashi is affecting him, but really he's had a entire summer really of being on the losing side. And okay, it's not been him taking the beating, but I also don't see how he can go from being the downtrodden part, in a downtrodden tag team, for one better phrase, to winning with G1. I mean, we've got to remember as well, we haven't had back-to-back G1 winners for the best part of 20 years.
Yep.
So I don't see Ibushi doing it. I can see this being a down year for Kota. Maybe gets a win over Suzuki to get another title shot. But even then, Matt's still really heavily underscoring how much he's fallen. I see this being a less than he's not going to be batting 500 this year, and 2021 is when any resurgence will begin.
We will see what happens. As we said, certainly the block everyone is looking at probably in terms just the storylines, the potential matches, and all that. And as we said, there is stuff that doesn't necessarily pertain to the actual tournament that are going to be involved there as well. And now on to B. We run through it here. Hiroshi Tanahashi, Hiroki Goto, Toriano, Yoshihashi, Sanada, Tetsuya Naito, Evil, Zack Sabre Jr., Juice Robinson, and Kenta make up Block B here. And I guess, Ian, we start and look at this block overall. It's a very, fascinating lineup. Of course, you've got the LIJ situation here where you've got Evil in there, you've got Naito, you've got Sanada, you've got all these different, tying stories that seem to sort of go together here. And I think that's probably going to be the big focus here when you look at this particular block. And of course, Kenta as well, who is someone that's coming in with certainly a lot of momentum.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as soon as this field was announced, Kenta, you've got Evil, the de facto leader of Los Ingobernables, de facto leader of Bullet Club, used to be LIJ, and I guess Kenta, maybe not the leader. Obviously, Jay White was before everything happened, but you've got some very interesting interplay in Block B between Evil and Kenta. You've also got the perennial LIJ match, which before, because you had three heavyweights, you're also going to get at least two in one block. Naito and Sanada, I think maybe Sanada's going to be a spoiler in some sense here. But yeah, I mean, this isn't, I'm calling this a storyline block, but let's be realistic. You still have some guys who can still go. You've got Zack Sabre Jr., Tanahashi when he's on a good night. I mean, this is the first year he's not explicitly coming in with, an injury, but, he's had all summer long with his knees and ankles being ripped at. So, there's going to be a lot of tape on most body parts. But, yeah, I mean, this one, obviously, Kenta came in, a very late edition. Juice Robinson, another late edition. So, yeah, you've got some names who, most who haven't been seen on New Japan, over in Japan since February. Juice hasn't even been on the US shows.
Right.
He's been healing a leg injury since the shutdown in February. So, some interesting names here, but I think in terms of, if you want to judge by star ratings, this is maybe slightly a weaker block, but I think this is the one where we are going to see a lot of interplay, whether it's Bullet Club, teasing implosion. I've seen some people suggest maybe LIJ starting fighting on themselves, but Matches may not be as consistent here, but it was definitely going to be a lot to take away from this in terms of storylines.
Yep, you've got some compelling stories here for sure, and let's talk about Evil, because certainly he's been someone that's really been thrown to the forefront here. Of course, as we know, someone having the double gold, the one that beat Naito, and what if? I guess there have been different opinions on this in terms of looking at sort of that run for Evil and maybe where he goes from here. What did you think of him beating Naito? Because I know there were a lot of people that had different opinions, and maybe just what you've seen from Evil overall here, and what is, obviously, as we know, if we look back to last year's G1, you look where Evil is now, it's a completely different setup for him now entering this one.
So the thing with New Japan is any change in character, they hammer it home into the ground. I mean, it was before my time watching regularly, but, when Bad Luck Fale was brought in, he was beating guys every night, stretching them out with the same move. Was to make sure that, yes, we're in the era now where the show is available to stream live, but you're looking, it's going from town to town to town. If you do, for argument's sake, say if Tori, well, no use to the hypothetical, Okada earlier this year, he debuted that modified Cobra Clutch. That was on every single show across every single town they went to,
right? Because
they were debuting that move and make sure that you knew that this is a big deal, and when it comes to a big scene, when you saw that was the one thing to be wary of. With Evil, you saw that in the New Japan Cup gradually. He was starting to take more shortcuts. He was getting more into the low blows. He was getting more into the other cheating. That was the sign. And then, of course, when it came to Dominion, he won the title, and that they just went overboard there. I would hope they tone that down a bit. I mean, we know Evil's Bullet Club. We know he's heel now. To me, I just have a massive worry that, one, for a guy who until 3 weeks back was double champion, he has one main event in this entire tour.
Yep.
And bear in mind the whole Evil push was meant to be written long ago. It wasn't some knee-jerk response to COVID. Right, let's give this guy a try out and see how he fares. For a guy to have gone from double champion to one main event, to me, suggests he's maybe not the top threat in Block B. And I'm wondering if KENTA hadn't come over, shall we say, Evil may have been the big star in that block. I'm thinking of KENTA returning. In fact, he won the New Japan Cup USA for a title shot against John Moxley whenever that's ever going to happen. I do wonder if KENTA is going to try and come away with 2 tournament wins this year.
And let's stay with KENTA for a second, because I was actually going to bring him up, because he's someone too. I mean, we remember kind of, when he came in, and obviously he left WWE, and everyone was just kind of waiting for that next move, and then he comes in, and now, he's had this run that he's had. What are some of the things that have really stood out to you with KENTA? Because as we said, I mean, as soon as we started talking about this particular block, I mean, he's someone that comes in with a lot of momentum, and I think he's someone that is going to be a lot of fun to watch in this tournament just because of the different styles he's going to go up against in this block. But also, I just see him as being someone that can really use this, which he's already used this era, sort of just to springboard himself forward. But I think he could really use this G1 here that could sort of transform him into really getting to that next level and being right there, maybe with some of these other guys that we're talking about near the top there.
I mean, again, you look at what New Japan do. It's very rare a new guy comes in and they're straight into the top.
Yep.
Last year he came in. He was under the tutelage of Kazuchika Okada. Then you had a return of the G1 finals and then a brief never title run. And then, obviously when we hit pause, he was off the books for 6 months. To me, the telling thing with KENTA is, I don't know if he would have won the New Japan Cup had it gone ahead in its original form, but the fact that he won the US version, and yes, it's for a US title shot, but let's be realistic here, AEW don't seem to be letting John Moxley out for any independent dates at the moment, certainly not for empty arena shows. So that's a title shot which, right now, it's just a briefcase. There's no... I'm watching New Japan Strong. They effectively look to book for shows week to week. They announced that the Lionsgate Crown show, and it was after the show finished, they told you what that format actually was. So if there is storylines there, but there's nothing really long term. I couldn't tell you, and I doubt they could tell you, that Kent is going to have a shot at John Moxley on New Japan Strong in December, for instance. Now, to me, that New Japan USA Cup thing is the key because Kenta going into a shutdown, no, I don't say he was treading water, no, he just had a double title shot. But you've got a guy who's coming up that double title shot, and yes, he lost. But I honestly think had COVID not happened, had New Japan kept going, he would have been there or thereabouts throughout the spring and the summer. Which is why I'm thinking I don't think he wins the tournament, but I do see him as coming out winning B block, and that momentum continues. And who knows, maybe G1 next year be Kenta's year, but very rare do they take anyone and have him in the real big spot within 2 years of them joining, especially when you consider his past pro wrestling known, then obviously shall I say the middling run of WWE for being generous.
Absolutely, and you did mention SANADA too. He's someone I wanted to bring up because he's someone that I've always thought, you see those flashes of what he's capable of, and for him, we talked about KENTA. It's maybe not exactly the same because they're different in terms of where they've come from in terms of getting to New Japan, but I think you look at SANADA and he's been someone that you see all the flashes of what he's capable of, but something you do mention, of course, and this is in your preview too, is he's basically going to be in that background with the this LIJ Bullet Club storyline within this block, and I wonder exactly what that means for him in terms of what he could be capable of, how many wins does he get in this block, and really just maybe his overall performances in this G1 this year.
So I think storyline wise, SANADA clearly is the second fiddle in this block for LIJ. Now the big thing for me is, and if you want to go on for kayfabe, he's been teaming with Evil for years. He would have seen stuff that's made him tick. Now, to me, you do have to wonder how long do you go for the whole always a bridesmaid, never bride scenario.
Right.
How long can a guy like SANADA keep being in second place? I mean, there was no reports last year's meant to be the year he kicked on and pushed on. Well, that didn't happen. But I do wonder, and this is another theory I've seen floated around, is after the G1, do we see Bullet Club and LIJ dismantle, and do they shake things up? I mean, Bullet Club's been going around for a lot longer than anybody expected. LIJ is a similar kind of thing. And yes, you can shake things up, you add new people, you call new people leads and what have you, but at the end of the day, these are factions that have been going around 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And at some point, you've got to go, well, what more stories can we tell? I'm not saying you put SANADA in Bullet Club and you have Kent become part of LIJ, but you do get to a point where the very image of Bullet Club, the very image of LIJ, can only go so far. Yet they're rattling out Bullet Club T-shirts, they're rattling out LIJ merch all the time, but at some point you need to shake things up, and I do believe that at least one of those two factions, I do think we are going to start seeing stuff in the G1 which dismantles him. And I wouldn't be too surprised if we had somebody like a SANADA leaving LIJ. I mean, we've got that match not in the final night. I'm just trying to pull this up. On October 8th, it's KENTA SANADA. It's the Naito SANADA matches, one I was looking at. As usually New Japan have intra LIJ matches, and you have them to do the whole, well, we're not going to fight, but we really are. To me, especially with everyone still stinging from Evil leaving, it's October 1st in Niigata.
Yes.
That's where I could see, maybe not a full-blown explosion, but I can definitely see what's the WWE reason, more dissension in the ranks if Velocity can go Bernardo Stage Japan.
No, that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that whole story plays out for sure. And of course, before we wrap up, B here, we have to talk about Tanahashi, who, as you've said, and you pointed this out in your article as well, just kind of one of those years for him when you look at maybe the year he's had, obviously not his best year, and now we talked about the teaming with Ibushi and all that earlier. What are your expectations for the Ace here? Because it seems like it's one of those situations where he is in this block, and obviously he's not the main story in this because of what we just talked about, but he's probably, I guess, going to certainly play a factor, but how big of a factor, that's going to be interesting to see.
So at one point going through my pick'ems, I had him as the only guy with no points.
Wow.
And and I've got him finishing with on Form 5 record with Juice and Zack Sabre Jr. So I can see this being a very slow start, and then something comes in and he realizes, get my what together and actually get back to the form of old. I think the days of Tanahashi winning the G1, I think he won 2 years ago. I think that's the last one. I mean, clearly, we've had the years where he's come into the G1 of injuries. And his 2020 so far, to me, is just been Zack Sabre Jr. tearing on him with dragon screws on loop since February. So, yeah, it's sad to say. I mean, I don't think it's quite like a Nakanishi situation where you've got a guy who at one point was top of the mountain but now is immobile, but he's definitely on the falling part of his career, unfortunately. And I think he's not in any danger of finishing rock bottom in this group. I've got Yoshihashi finishing 2-8. Bear in mind, the story of him last year was he wasn't good enough. Well, to me, the only reason he's in is because he's part of Never Trios champs here. But I think with Tana, the ace he's the ace in name only from my life from this point. That's going to be unpopular, but you look at his recent form. He's going to get wins, but I think it's going to be the wins you'd expect him to get. Against maybe your Yanos, your Yoshihashis, maybe against your Juice Robinsons, but against much bigger names, that's where he's going to struggle. And I think this is the G1 which firmly slots him as those main events of a distant history.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating for me too, and I think for most people, because having watched him, of course, all these years, you're very fascinating to see, kind of see where they go with him, as we said, within this block in particular, but maybe just overall in the tournament as well. All right, Ian, we'll wrap it up here with this. I guess just your overall thoughts here. You talked about your potential, kind of the guys you look at as potentially having the best shot to win, but what do you feel like the biggest takeaway is going to be when we finish this G1 here? And as you said, you mentioned your winner earlier, but what do you feel like we're going to be talking about the most when we come out of this G1 this year?
I think this year we're going to be talking about how Block A elevates and solidifies people's spots going forward. But I think the big thing coming out of the G1 isn't going to be a match. Bearing in mind, obviously, everything that's going on, we still don't know what the winner of this is getting.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's going to be a Wrestle Kingdom 15. We don't know if it's going to be the Tokyo Dome. From what I understand, with the situation in Japan, they are it's currently, I believe, 50% of capacity, and they're potentially looking at lifting that. So we may have a situation like we had in Jingu Stadium with maybe only 10,000 fans, which it's still a Wrestle Kingdom in name, but it's not going to have a feel. So the thing I'm going to be keeping an eye out on, because let's be honest, it is going to be the usual suspects. It'll be your Okadas, Ospreys, Kentas, Naitos. Maybe we'll dip down to Evil SANADA. It's going to be one of those six, I believe, winning the G1. But I think it's where you go to from here, because they're announcing the Power Struggle Tour. We've also got, remember, the Best of Super Juniors didn't happen. That's an announcement which could come up for future too. But I think the big takeaway for this for me is what the winner is going to get. And if we are sitting here on October 18th after finish watching the finals in Sumo Hall and no mention has been made of Wrestle Kingdom, to me that would make me work. I would say if we don't have an announcement by then, that's telling me that whoever wins, it's going to be the safe choice. And going for a bit for a long game here. Okay, we had Okada Naito before. But Naito still hasn't had his Tokyo Dome moment.
Yeah.
He had that taken away from earlier this year. And if they're still playing it safe, well, may as well give Naito his Tokyo Dome moment in 2021. It's not a new match, but how much longer you can be able to push this off for?
Let the fun begin, right? Let the fun begin, because this is going to be another exciting installment of the G1. We know that. And Ian, as I mentioned earlier, you do just fantastic work. And I know for all our 411 listeners, they already read your stuff over on the site. But let everybody know where they can find all of your work. And as I mentioned earlier, we will include your G1 Climax 30 preview in the show notes as well, so everybody can check that out.
Yep, so the New Japan coverage is over on 411menu.com/wrestling. Covering New Japan mostly, since they're putting on the most shows. You'll also see NXT UK for the 2 or 3 people who watch that. That's coming back this week. WXW, it's one of my favourite promotions based out of Germany. They've actually been adding on to the WWE network. So if you've got that subscription laying around, give them a watch. I believe this weekend they're starting to add the Shotgun weekly program on there, which, okay, it's in German, but it does have English subtitles and English commentary. Well worth a watch if you like, just basic storyline telling and solid wrestling to go with it. So yeah, all the G1 reviews, they'll be up pretty much within minutes of the final bell. Obviously based in the UK, and looking at the schedules, I mean, this Saturday 9 o'clock UK time starts Sunday 6 a.m. I'm gonna have to bust up that Walking Dead gift Larry used to use, because that Sunday morning is going to be.
Yes, that is going to be a lot of fun, and as you said, I think Larry, for someone like me, he's the reason I started watching New Japan, and I've said that a lot, but like he is the reason I got into it, and it's something where I know I'm not the only person that's going to say that, because just reading all his work throughout the years, and of course reading your stuff now, I just love it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And Ian, again, thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun, and look forward to talking to you again more here as the tournament goes along, and we'll probably do another episode once it wraps up.
It's a date, and it's always a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Blake.
Thanks again to Ian Hamilton for joining me here on the 411 on Wrestling podcast. And as mentioned, please be sure to check out Ian's preview that he has over at 411mania.com. We'll have the link to that in the show notes, and check out all the other great work that he's doing over there with all his reviews. And as he mentioned, he will have 411 Mania's reviews for each night in the G1, so be sure to check those out. As he said, he'll have those up pretty quickly as soon as the shows are over. So check that out over at 411mania.com. And as I continue to mention, also be sure to donate to the GoFundMe for Larry Zonka's family. And as I said in the restart episode, I guess you could say, we will continue to have the link to that in the show notes in the podcast. So if you're someone that's already donated, thank you so much. If you want to continue to share that, everyone would appreciate it. So be sure to check that out. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any of your favorite podcast app, just search for 411 on Wrestling, and you'll find it on there and be able to subscribe. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for the great feedback on the restart episode that we had earlier in the week with Andrew Thompson. The feedback was fantastic, and so we do really appreciate you listening to this podcast, and we hope you will continue to do so. So be sure to subscribe to check out all the great stuff that we do have on the way here on the 411 on Wrestling podcast. So thank you for listening, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you guys here next time on the 411 on Wrestling podcast.